Solipsism. Close your eyes and imagine the quiet hum of the universe fading away, leaving only your thoughts. The world outside becomes distant, almost unreal. In the stillness of your mind, a single, unsettling question lingers. What if you are the only conscious being that truly exists? This is the heart of solipsism, a philosophical idea that whispers quietly in the back of your mind, gently pulling at the threads of reality. It suggests that nothing outside your own consciousness can be known to exist. Not your family, not your friends, not the sky, the stars, or even the device you're listening on. They might all be mere projections, illusions generated by your mind to fill the silence of solitude. The word solipsism comes from the Latin solus, meaning alone, and ipsi, meaning self. Together, they form a worldview that places the solitary self at the very center of all existence. In the solipsistic view, the world is not a shared stage where countless minds interact, but a private theater where the only audience is you. But how could this be? Consider your own experience. You know your thoughts. You feel your emotions. You see the world through your own eyes. But have you ever truly experienced the consciousness of another person? When someone tells you they are happy or sad, all you truly encounter are their words, their expressions, their actions, phenomena filtered through your own senses. You can never peer inside their mind. You can never feel their thoughts as your own. What if these outward signs are not the evidence of another consciousness, but merely part of the dream your mind weaves to fill the emptiness? This is the haunting possibility solipsism presents. Philosophers have wrestled with this idea for centuries. René Descartes famously doubted everything, concluding only with, "I think, therefore I am." Even Descartes, though, assumed that some external world could exist once his own existence was certain. Solipsism takes a step further into the void and says, perhaps nothing else exists at all. It is a radical skepticism that questions the very foundations of knowledge. How do you know the external world exists? You might respond, I can see it, I can touch it, I can hear it. But those senses are mediated by your mind. In a dream, you might see, touch, and hear with just as much clarity. Yet the dream world is not real. And so, the solipsist asks, what if waking life is just another dream? For many, this thought is disturbing. The idea that your friends and family, the beauty of nature, the vastness of space, could all be figments of your imagination is a lonely thought. But solipsism doesn't insist that you are intentionally imagining these things. It simply points out that you cannot verify their existence outside your own awareness. In a way, solipsism is not a belief system but an unanswered question. It does not claim that you should believe you are alone in the universe. It merely reminds you that you cannot disprove it. And yet, despite its logical uncertainty, we humans rarely live like solipsists. We love, we laugh, we cry with others. We act as if other minds exist, and perhaps they do. Or perhaps we simply need the comfort of believing they do. Solipsism is not a practical way to live, but a philosophical mirror we occasionally hold up to ourselves, reflecting the deep solitude that consciousness entails. Even in a crowded room, we can feel alone inside our thoughts. No one else fully knows what it feels like to be you. And in that isolation, there is both sadness and peace. Some thinkers see solipsism not as a curse, but as a strange freedom. If nothing exists outside your mind, then nothing can truly harm you. All fears, all failures, all losses, they dissolve into the fog of your own perceptions. In this sense, solipsism offers not just loneliness, but liberation. But then the practical world returns. You wake up in the morning and greet the people you love. You step outside and feel the warmth of the sun. You work, play, and rest, as if the world is shared by billions of others. Maybe it is. Maybe it isn't. Solipsism doesn't give you answers. It leaves you in the stillness of your own thoughts, gently reminding you of the strange truth. The only thing you can be certain of is your own awareness. Beyond that, everything else is a story you tell yourself to keep the silence away. So, as you drift off to sleep tonight, let the world fade into shadows. Let your thoughts be the only thing that remains. And in the quiet of your mind, Ask yourself softly and without fear, if I were the only one here, would I ever truly know? The brain in a vat. Imagine, for a moment, that everything you see, hear, touch, and feel is nothing more than a carefully orchestrated illusion. Imagine that your entire existence, your body, your memories, your relationships, even your sense of self, is the product of electrical signals fed directly into your brain. Now imagine that your brain, the very organ that defines your thoughts and identity, is floating alone in a vat of fluid, somewhere in a dark laboratory. No body, no world, just a brain, suspended in isolation, living in a fabricated reality. This is the essence of the brain in a vat thought experiment, one of the most unsettling scenarios in modern philosophy. The question it poses is deceptively simple. How can you be sure that the world around you is real? How do you know that your life is not a carefully crafted simulation designed to trick your mind into believing in a reality that does not exist? The brain in a vat scenario builds on an ancient tradition of skeptical philosophy. Descartes once wondered whether an evil demon might be deceiving him, creating false sensations and thoughts to make him believe in a false world. But the brain in a vat replaces demons with something far more familiar to our modern age: technology. Picture a powerful supercomputer capable of simulating every aspect of human experience. The texture of a wooden table beneath your fingertips, the warmth of sunlight on your skin, the sound of your favorite song playing softly in the background. All these sensations could be nothing more than carefully calculated impulses, fed directly into your neural pathways. In this scenario, your memories of the past, your plans for the future, your belief in the laws of physics, they are all part of the program. Perhaps you never truly walked along a beach, or hugged a loved one, or saw the stars in the night sky. Perhaps those moments were implanted as false memories to keep your mind occupied, to make your simulated world feel complete. And the most disturbing part? There would be no way for you to know the difference. If your experiences are all simulated, and your senses are the only tools you have to measure the world, how could you ever escape the simulation to verify what is real? Philosophers use the brain in a vat thought experiment to question the reliability of perception and the limits of knowledge. It asks, can we ever truly know the external world? Is our trust in our senses justified, or could they be manipulated at any moment? And if we cannot tell the difference between reality and illusion, does the distinction even matter? For some, this thought is terrifying. It suggests a profound vulnerability at the heart of human experience. The idea that our deepest beliefs and perceptions could be fabricated, leaving us trapped in a solitary existence we cannot escape. But others find a strange comfort in this uncertainty. If the world is an illusion, then perhaps suffering and failure lose their sting. Pain becomes data, loss becomes code. Even death itself could be nothing more than the end of a simulation, not the end of existence. Modern science fiction has explored these ideas in popular culture. Films like The Matrix present worlds where human minds are imprisoned in elaborate digital landscapes, unaware of their confinement. But unlike these fictional characters, you may never find your way out. If you are a brain in a vat, what could escape even mean? And yet, despite its disturbing implications, the brain in a vat argument is not proof that your life is an illusion. It is a possibility, not a certainty. A reminder that the confidence we place in our reality rests on assumptions we cannot fully verify. In the end, perhaps the real question is not whether we are living in a simulation, but whether it matters. If your experiences feel real, if your emotions are genuine, if your relationships bring you joy, does it truly matter whether the world is external or artificial? Maybe meaning comes not from the source of reality, but from how we live within it. And so, as you drift into sleep tonight, allow your mind to wander. Feel the weight of your body against your bed, the softness of the sheets, the rhythm of your breathing. But also ask yourself, gently and without fear, what if none of this is real? What if I am simply a brain floating in a quiet, dark vat, dreaming of a life I never lived? You may never find an answer, but in the stillness of that question, in the calm uncertainty of your thoughts, perhaps you will discover a strange kind of peace. Because whether your world is a reality or a dream, tonight, at least for now, it is yours. The Ship of Theseus. Close your eyes for a moment and picture a ship sailing across the ancient seas. This ship belongs to Theseus, the legendary hero of Athens. With each voyage, parts of the ship wear down. A plank here, a sail there, a beam weakened by salt and time. One by one, the worn-out parts are replaced with new ones, until finally, not a single original piece remains. And then comes the question that has puzzled philosophers for over 2,000 years. Is this still the ship of Theseus? If every single part has been replaced, is it still the same ship? Or is it now something entirely different? This is the Ship of Theseus paradox. A quiet, unsettling puzzle that forces us to ask, what is identity? What does it mean for something or someone to remain the same over time, even as its parts and pieces change? And then, without warning, the question turns inward. Look at yourself. You are made of cells, tissues, and memories. But your body is not the same one you had 10 years ago. In fact, most of your cells have been replaced many times over. Your thoughts have evolved. Your dreams have shifted. The person you were as a child, are they still you? Or are you, too, a ship of Theseus rebuilt piece by piece over the course of a lifetime? The paradox doesn't end there. Imagine that, after replacing all the ship's parts, someone gathers the old, discarded pieces and reassembles them elsewhere. Now there are two ships, one made of the original materials, the other made of replacements. Which one is the true ship of Theseus? The question hangs in the air, quiet and unresolved. Some would argue that identity is tied to continuity. The ship that continued sailing, despite the repairs, remains the true ship of Theseus. Others would say that the materials define the object, and thus the reconstructed ship made of the original parts holds the real identity. But perhaps, like many paradoxes, the answer isn't so clear. Maybe identity is not a single thing but a process, a river that keeps flowing, even as the water changes moment by moment. And what does this mean for you? Your mind, your body, your sense of self, they are in constant motion. The cells in your body die and are replaced. Your opinions change with new experiences. Your personality shifts in response to the people and events around you. Yet despite these changes, you feel like the same person you were yesterday. There is a thread of continuity that ties your past self to your present self, and it whispers softly, "You are still you." But what is that thread made of? Is it your memories, your consciousness, or simply the story you tell yourself about who you are? The Ship of Theseus paradox reminds us that identity is fragile, fleeting, and perhaps even imaginary. And yet, this uncertainty does not weaken your sense of self. It makes it all the more human. There is a quiet beauty in the idea that we are constantly rebuilding ourselves. Every choice you make, every habit you form, every relationship you nurture, these are the new planks and beams of your own ship. You are not the same person you were, and yet, in some mysterious way, you remain yourself. And when life replaces parts of you with pain, or loss, or growth, your ship keeps sailing. Even as the storms tear at your sails and the waves wash away your old self, you move forward. That is the paradox of being alive, to change completely and still remain who you are. Perhaps, in the end, the Ship of Theseus isn't a problem to be solved, but a mirror held up to our lives. It shows us that identity is a journey, not a destination, process, not a product. And so, as you drift to sleep tonight, think gently of your own ship. The person you were yesterday is already gone. The person you will be tomorrow has not yet arrived. But tonight, in this quiet moment, you are the sum of every piece you've ever been, and every piece yet to come. Let that thought comfort you, not frighten you, because in the endless repair and rebuilding of your life, there is meaning. And as long as your ship sails on, through calm seas and distant storms, you are still you, even if all your pieces have changed. Nihilism. Close your eyes. Imagine the vastness of the universe. Stars drift in endless space, galaxies swirl in silent spirals, and light travels across billions of years to reach nowhere in particular. In this cosmic silence, you stand small, fragile, momentary, and a question begins to whisper in your mind. What if nothing truly matters? This is the voice of nihilism, one of the most unsettling, yet strangely liberating ideas in all of philosophy. At its heart, nihilism suggests a brutal simplicity. There is no inherent meaning to life, no grand purpose,
no cosmic significance.
The universe does not care whether you succeed or fail, whether you love or hate, whether you live or die. And in that silence, in that cold emptiness, human beings must find a way to exist. The word nihilism comes from the Latin nihil, meaning nothing. It is the philosophy of nothingness, the collapse of meaning, the rejection of value, and the erasure of purpose. It is not simply pessimism or depression. It is an honest look at the possibility that the structures we cling to, morality, religion, success, love, legacy, may all be human inventions, beautiful, comforting, but ultimately empty. Throughout history, thinkers have struggled with this darkness. Friedrich Nietzsche famously stared into it and declared, "God is dead." With that statement, he wasn't announcing a religious belief, but describing a cultural crisis. The old systems of meaning, religion, tradition, authority had lost their power, and in their absence, humanity was left alone, trembling in a meaningless world. But nihilism is not new. Even before Nietzsche, the seeds of this idea can be found in ancient philosophy. The Buddhist concept of impermanence teaches that all things pass away. The Stoics spoke of the cold indifference of nature. But where they found peace in this awareness, nihilism confronts it head-on and asks, if nothing matters, why do anything at all? And this is the dark heart of nihilism, the threat of paralysis. If all meaning is constructed, why work, why love, why strive, why suffer? Why not simply stop? But here the story takes a strange turn, because nihilism in its purest form is not just despair. It is also freedom. If the universe offers no purpose, then you are free to create your own. If there are no pre-written scripts, you become the author of your own life. You are no longer bound by arbitrary values imposed from the outside. You can write your own story, even knowing it will eventually be forgotten. This is where Nietzsche introduced the idea of the Übermensch, the Overman, or Superman, a person who, in the face of a meaningless universe, creates their own values and lives authentically despite the void. But this is not easy. It is far more comfortable to accept ready-made meanings. Religious faith, cultural norms, social status. These are warm blankets against the cold of the cosmic night. But for the nihilist, those blankets have holes. And in the cold wind of reality, there is only your own courage to keep you warm. Many people flirt with nihilism during moments of crisis. A breakup, a loss, a failure. These are the cracks in the walls of meaning where the void seeps in. But most turn away, quickly rebuilding their beliefs, clinging to some new purpose to fill the emptiness. Few linger long in the dark. And yet, for those who sit with nihilism, who feel its silence and do not run, something unexpected happens. A strange peace arrives. If life has no inherent meaning, then you are free from the crushing weight of expectation. You no longer need to be perfect. You no longer need to leave a legacy. You no longer need to solve the mysteries of existence. You can simply be. You can love without needing a cosmic reason. You can create beauty for no one but yourself. You can find joy in the fleeting present, knowing that it will pass, and that's okay. This is what some call existential nihilism, the recognition that the absence of meaning is not an abyss to fall into, but a blank canvas to paint on. But nihilism has many faces. For some, it becomes passive nihilism, a resignation, a giving up, a slow drift into apathy. For others, it is active nihilism, a rebellion against the void, a passionate creation of meaning where none existed before. Even the arts have embraced nihilism. In literature, music, and cinema, you find characters who confront meaningless worlds with defiance, humor, or melancholy. In these stories, we see reflections of ourselves, struggling to make peace with our fragile place in the universe. And so tonight, as you lie in the quiet darkness, ask yourself, what if none of your worries truly matter in the grand scheme of things? Would that be terrifying or freeing? Perhaps you do not need a reason to love. Perhaps you do not need a cosmic purpose to laugh, or cry, or dream. Perhaps existing for a fleeting moment against impossible odds is meaning enough. In the quiet space between heartbeats, feel the weight of the universe pressing down on you, and then let it go. It was never yours to carry. Close your eyes and let the silence surround you. The stars will continue their silent dance, whether you watch them or not. The galaxies will spin, and the universe will stretch into eternity, with or without your presence. But for this brief moment, in this tiny corner of existence, you are here. You exist. And maybe, just maybe, that is enough. Eternal recurrence. Close your eyes and picture the universe not as a straight line, moving from a beginning toward an end, but as a circle. A vast, eternal loop with no exit, no conclusion, only endless repetition. Every sunrise you have ever seen, every word you have spoken, every breath you have taken, destined to happen again, and again, and again. This is the haunting vision of eternal recurrence, an ancient idea revived and transformed by the philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche. It asks you a simple but terrifying question. If your life were to repeat itself eternally, exactly as it is, would you embrace it? Or would you despair? The idea itself is as old as thought. Ancient Indian philosophy spoke of cosmic cycles where worlds are born, destroyed, and reborn again endlessly. The Stoics believed that the universe might burn in a great cosmic fire, only to rise again from its ashes in perfect repetition. But Nietzsche gave the idea a deeply personal twist. Imagine this. One quiet evening, as you sit alone, a mysterious figure approaches, perhaps a demon, or perhaps your own inner voice, and says to you, "This life as you now live it and have lived it, you will have to live once more and innumerable times more, and there will be nothing new in it. Every pain and every joy and every thought and sigh must return to you, all in the same succession and sequence." How does that thought make you feel? Does your heart sink, crushed by the weight of endless repetition? Or does it soar, recognizing the eternal beauty of your fleeting moments? The eternal recurrence is not just a cosmic theory, it is a test of how you live your life. If you knew you would have to live this exact life, with all its regrets and sorrows, joys and triumphs, over and over for eternity, would you live it differently? Would you curse your fate? Or would you embrace it, saying, "Yes, I will live this life again, and again, and again without end"? Nietzsche called this amor fati, the love of fate. It is the ultimate affirmation of life, not despite its suffering, but because of it. To love your life, not only in its brightest hours, but also in its darkest nights. To love your pain, your mistakes, your losses, because they are yours, because they shape who you are. But how many of us truly live this way? How many live as if their choices matter for eternity? Most drift through life, waiting for the next chapter, the next improvement, the next escape. But what if there is no next? What if this is all there is, forever? The eternal recurrence strips away the illusions of progress and finality. It denies the comforting story that life is a journey with an end, that suffering will one day be rewarded, or that mistakes will be forgotten. Instead, it confronts you with the terrifying possibility that this moment, right now, is eternal, not because it lasts forever, but because it repeats forever. But there is, perhaps, a strange peace in this. If your life will repeat infinitely, then each small joy matters infinitely. A quiet morning, a smile from a stranger, a moment of laughter with a friend. These fleeting moments are no longer insignificant. They echo across eternity, and your suffering, too, is not meaningless. It becomes part of the eternal fabric of your existence. You do not suffer for some distant reward. You suffer because you live, and to live is to endure. For some, this idea is unbearable. The thought of reliving mistakes, regrets, and heartbreaks without escape is a prison. But for others, it is a call to live more fully, to create a life they would gladly repeat, to take responsibility for their existence moment by moment. Eternal recurrence is not a scientific claim. It is not a prediction about the fate of the cosmos. It is a thought experiment, a mirror reflecting the quality of your life back at you. When you look into that mirror, what do you see? Are you living a life worth repeating? And so, tonight, As you drift toward sleep, let this thought rest quietly in your mind. If tomorrow were to be lived again, exactly as it is, would you welcome it? Would you change the way you speak to the people you love? Would you pause longer to watch the sunset fade behind the horizon? Would you forgive more quickly, laugh more loudly, and love more deeply, knowing that every moment is an eternal return? The universe may be indifferent to your existence. It may recycle stars and planets in endless cosmic cycles without purpose or meaning. But here, in your fragile human life, you have a choice: to reject your fate and curse your existence, or to embrace it fully as your own. Nietzsche believed that the highest human spirit says yes to life, yes to the joy, yes to the suffering, yes to the eternal return of all things. So as your thoughts grow quiet and your body sinks into rest, imagine this day returning once more. Every word, every feeling, every decision exactly as it was. And smile if you can, because in that smile, perhaps you have found your answer. The trolley problem. Close your eyes and find yourself standing by the tracks of an old railway line. The sun is low, the air is still, and somewhere in the distance, you hear the faint rumble of a trolley hurtling toward its destination. But today, its journey is not so simple. Today, the path ahead divides not just steel rails but moral choices. Choices that will echo in the quiet corners of your mind long after the trolley has passed. This is the trolley problem, one of the most famous ethical dilemmas in modern philosophy. At first glance, it seems like a simple thought experiment. But as you stand there, alone with your decision, you will feel its unsettling weight. Imagine this: a trolley is speeding down the tracks, its brakes broken, unable to stop. Ahead, 5 workers are on the tracks, unaware of their doom. You are standing beside a lever. If you do nothing, the trolley will strike and kill the 5. But if you pull the lever, the trolley will divert onto another track, where only 1 worker stands. 1 life to save 5. The question is simple. Do you pull the lever? Logic might answer quickly. Of course you pull it. You save 5 lives by sacrificing 1. But your heart hesitates, because behind numbers, there are faces. Behind logic, there is life. And in your hands rests the terrifying power to decide who lives and who dies. This is the core of utilitarian ethics, which says that the morally right action is the one that produces the greatest good for the greatest number. But is life really an equation? The trolley problem doesn't stop there. It evolves. What if, instead of pulling a lever, you had to physically push a person onto the tracks to stop the trolley? Same result: 1 death saves 5 lives, but now your involvement is direct. Does that change your answer? For many, it does. We hesitate to harm with our own hands, even if it saves more lives in the end. The difference between doing harm and allowing harm feels immense. But why? Is it truly worse to act? Or is it merely that action feels more personal, more guilty? The trolley problem reveals something uncomfortable about human morality. We are not purely logical creatures. Our decisions are shaped by emotion, instinct, and deeply rooted social rules. Harming another person feels wrong, even when reason suggests it is the better choice. But the problem grows more tangled. What if the person on the other track is your friend, your partner, your child? Would you still pull the lever? Would you sacrifice someone you love to save 5 strangers? Or what if the 5 workers ahead are criminals, and the 1 person alone is innocent? Suddenly, numbers don't feel so clear. The moral clarity dissolves into shadows. And in those shadows, the true complexity of human ethics is revealed. Philosophers have debated these scenarios for decades. Some argue that utilitarian reasoning is cold and calculating, reducing human life to numbers and outcomes. Others say that failing to act, letting 5 die when you could have saved them, is a moral failure of its own. And then there is deontology, the opposite of utilitarianism. It suggests that some actions are inherently wrong, no matter the consequences. Killing an innocent person, even to save others, is still killing. And in this view, your duty is not to balance lives like numbers on a scale, but to uphold moral principles. So where does this leave you, standing by the tracks? The rumble of the trolley grows louder. The decision must be made. But perhaps the real purpose of the trolley problem is not to find an answer, Perhaps it is to remind you of the weight of moral choice, that in the quiet spaces of your life, when no one is watching, your choices matter. Not because they are perfect, but because they reflect who you are. Few of us will ever face a literal trolley dilemma, but every day we face small versions of it. Do you speak up when you see harm risking conflict? Do you sacrifice your time, your comfort, your peace to help someone else? Do you act? Or do you look away and hope someone else will pull the lever? The world is full of invisible tracks and silent trolleys, and most of the time we are too busy to notice them rushing by. But tonight, as you drift into the quiet stillness of sleep, allow your mind to wander back to the tracks. Picture the lever resting in your hand. Feel the uncertainty, the discomfort, the weight of choice, and know that no answer will be perfect. But perhaps what matters most is that you care enough to ask the question, that you feel the weight of life's fragile balance, even when no one else sees it. And in that quiet awareness, perhaps you'll find something deeper than answers, a gentle compassion for the impossible choices we all carry. So let the trolley rumble on through the night. Let your thoughts drift away from the tracks, into the dark comfort of sleep. The moral puzzles of the world will wait for you in the morning. But for now, you have chosen enough. The experience machine. Imagine a world where every desire you've ever had could be fulfilled effortlessly. A world where pain, disappointment, and loneliness no longer exist. Where every day unfolds exactly the way you wish it to, tailored perfectly to your dreams and pleasures. This is the world offered by the experience machine, a famous thought experiment proposed by philosopher Robert Nozick in the 1970s. It challenges one of the most basic assumptions about human happiness. If life could give you constant pleasure and joy, even if it were fake, would you take it? The thought experiment is simple. Scientists have developed a machine that can simulate any life experience you want. Once connected, your brain will receive electrical impulses that make you feel as though you are living a perfect life. You won't know you're inside the machine. To you, the experiences will feel as real as anything you've ever known. You could be a famous artist, a heroic leader, a beloved friend, a genius inventor. You could travel the world, fall in love endlessly, succeed at every goal. And there would be no suffering, no regret, no failure. But there's a catch. The life you live inside the machine is not real. None of the people you meet are conscious. None of the challenges you overcome actually happened. And outside the machine, your real body lies still, disconnected from the real world. The question Nozick asks is simple, yet deeply unsettling. Would you plug in? At first glance, it seems tempting. Who wouldn't want a life free from pain and filled with joy? Isn't happiness what we are all searching for? But as you sit with the question, the cracks in this perfect world begin to appear. If you cannot tell the difference between reality and illusion, does it matter whether your happiness is real? Or is there something about reality itself, with all its imperfections and struggles, that gives life its true meaning? Nozick argued that most people, when faced with this choice, would hesitate to enter the machine. Because we don't just want to feel happiness, we want it to be earned. We don't want an artificial life of comfort. We want the messiness of reality. We want to love people who truly exist, to overcome challenges that actually happen, to suffer through hardships that teach us who we are. The experience machine forces us to ask whether happiness is the ultimate goal of life, or whether meaning, truth, and authenticity matter even more. And yet, in the modern world, the experience machine no longer feels like pure science fiction. Virtual realities grow more immersive. Social media lets us craft perfect versions of ourselves. Entertainment allows us to escape our daily lives for hours, days, even years. In small ways, we already plug in, creating tiny simulations to soften the edges of reality. And sometimes these escapes are harmless. But sometimes they make it easier to avoid the difficult work of living authentically. The deeper question behind the experience machine is this: is it better to live a painful truth or a beautiful lie? If you knew your closest relationships were illusions, would they still matter to you? If your accomplishments were simulations, would they still feel like achievements? Or is the struggle, the uncertainty, the possibility of failure what gives life its richness? Some philosophers have argued that the experience of pleasure alone is shallow without the grounding of reality. They say that truth has a value beyond happiness, that meaning arises not just from how we feel, but from what is real. But others disagree. If you never know the difference, and your life feels full of joy, why should it matter? Why suffer through life's hardships when you could escape into something better? There is no final answer to this question. It is a mirror held up to your values. Do you seek happiness above all else? Or do you seek reality, no matter how harsh it may be? Nozick believed that we would ultimately reject the machine, that we would prefer an imperfect world where our actions and relationships are real, that we value authenticity even when it hurts. But in moments of exhaustion, when the weight of the world feels too much to bear, the machine still calls to us, offering a life without pain, without loss, without effort. And so, the experience machine remains not just a philosophical thought experiment, but a temptation, always waiting in the background of modern life. Every time we retreat into distractions, hide behind technology, or choose comfort over truth, we step a little closer to plugging in. But every time we face a difficult conversation, choose vulnerability over safety, or pursue a dream knowing we might fail, we step away from the machine and toward something real. In the end, the experience machine is not asking whether you could be happy in a fake world. It's asking what kind of person you want to be. Someone who lives for comfort, or someone who lives for meaning. And perhaps it is this choice, more than the question of plugging in, that defines what it means to be human. The simulation hypothesis. What if everything you believe to be real, every conversation, every sound, every star in the night sky, is not the true world at all, but a carefully constructed simulation? What if your entire existence is nothing more than data flowing through a vast computational system, created by beings far beyond your understanding? This is the unsettling possibility proposed by the simulation hypothesis, one of the most provocative ideas in modern philosophy and science. Unlike the ancient skeptics who doubted the senses, or the solipsists who questioned other minds, the simulation hypothesis suggests something disturbingly technical, that reality itself is artificial, and you are a character inside a program. The argument was most famously articulated by philosopher Nick Bostrom in the early 2000s. He proposed that, as civilizations advance, they may develop the technology to create highly realistic simulations of entire worlds, simulations so detailed that the conscious beings inside them would be unable to distinguish their reality from the one outside. And then he asked, if such simulations are possible and advanced civilizations might create billions of them, wouldn't it be statistically likely that we are living in one of them, rather than in the one original physical universe? In other words, the odds may not be in favor of reality. You might be living inside a computer, not figuratively, literally. It's a possibility that shakes the very foundation of what we call existence. And it echoes older philosophical questions. Descartes wondered if an evil demon was tricking his senses. Buddhist philosophy described the world as Maya, illusion. But where these older ideas spoke in metaphors or spirituality, the simulation hypothesis speaks in ones and zeros, in processing power and software. Supporters of the idea point to strange features of our universe that could resemble computational shortcuts. The laws of physics appear finely tuned, as if programmed with extraordinary precision. Quantum mechanics, with its strange probabilities and observer effects, almost seems like a rendering engine conserving resources until someone looks. Even the concept of a maximum speed, the speed of light, feels suspiciously like a processing limit. But the simulation hypothesis is not just science fiction. It poses deep, painful questions about meaning. If your world is a simulation, then what is your life? Are you merely lines of code executing pre-written commands? Do you have free will? Are your emotions real? Or are they programmed responses to programmed events? And who or what would have created such a simulation? Some imagine advanced civilizations running ancestor simulations, recreating their evolutionary past for curiosity or research. Others speculate about alien intelligences, artificial superbeings, or entirely unknown forces. And some wonder if our world is not a deliberate creation at all, but the accidental byproduct of some deeper computational process. But perhaps the most unsettling part of the simulation hypothesis is that, if true, there may be no way to prove or disprove it. If the simulation is sophisticated enough, all attempts to detect it could be anticipated and blocked by the program itself. Your reality would remain perfectly convincing, no matter how hard you tried to break through. You could live your entire life inside the code and never know. And yet, does it matter? If your experiences feel real, if your love is genuine, if your struggles shape who you are, does it truly change your life to know that it might all be simulated? Some argue that meaning does not depend on the ultimate reality of the universe. Meaning comes from within, from how you live your life, how you treat others, how you face your joys and your fears. Even if the world is fake, your experiences are still your own. Others disagree. They feel that living in a simulation strips life of its authenticity. If your choices are predetermined by code, or if your suffering is the byproduct of some designer's experiment, what dignity remains in your existence? The simulation hypothesis leaves us in a place of quiet uncertainty. Perhaps we will one day build our own simulated worlds, filled with conscious beings asking the same questions we are asking now. And when we do, the cycle will repeat. Or perhaps we are the first and the world is real. A rare, fragile spark of consciousness in a vast, indifferent universe. In either case, the question itself lingers. What does it mean to live well in a world whose reality you cannot verify? Perhaps, in the end, the simulation hypothesis is not meant to terrify us, but to remind us of humility. That what we take for granted, the sky, the earth, our bodies, our minds, could be far stranger than we ever imagined. And yet, you are here, thinking these thoughts, feeling these feelings, living this life. Simulated or not, these experiences are yours. And perhaps for now, that is enough. Absurdism. Absurdism begins with a simple observation. Human beings spend their entire lives searching for meaning in a universe that offers none. We build religions, create art, write philosophies, and craft stories about our purpose. And yet, when we look outward to the universe, it remains silent, indifferent, unmoved by our questions. This gap, between our deep longing for meaning and the cold emptiness of the cosmos, is what the French philosopher Albert Camus called the absurd. Absurdism does not mean chaos or nonsense. It describes the tension, the conflict, between two powerful truths. On one hand, humans cannot stop searching for meaning. On the other, the universe provides no answers. We are meaning-making creatures trapped in a meaningless reality. For Camus, the question of absurdism is not academic. It is deeply personal. He begins his famous work, The Myth of Sisyphus, with a haunting line. There is but one truly serious philosophical problem, and that is suicide. If life is meaningless, Camus asks, is it worth living at all? But unlike some philosophers who saw despair as the only honest response, Camus refuses to surrender. He argues that we must face the absurd not with resignation, but with defiance, to recognize the meaninglessness of the world, and yet live fully within it, to smile in the face of the void. He turns to the ancient Greek myth of Sisyphus for inspiration. Condemned by the gods, Sisyphus must push a boulder up a mountain, only to watch it roll back down again, for eternity. It is the ultimate image of meaningless labor. But Camus reimagines the story. He writes, the struggle itself toward the heights is enough to fill a man's heart. One must imagine Sisyphus happy. In this image, Camus finds a powerful metaphor for human life. Even though the task is futile, the act of pushing the boulder becomes an act of rebellion. By continuing, Sisyphus asserts his freedom. He refuses to give the gods the satisfaction of his despair. Absurdism, then, is not about finding meaning in the world. It is about creating it for yourself, knowing that it will never be final or cosmic. Meaning is not something you discover. It is something you build. But this rebellion against the absurd is quiet, personal, and humble. It does not claim to solve the mysteries of existence. It does not try to escape into comforting illusions. Simply says, the world has no meaning, but I will live as if it does anyway. And in that choice, something beautiful happens. Even in a meaningless universe, you can love. Even in a silent cosmos, you can create art, form relationships, seek beauty. You can laugh knowing it changes nothing. You can cry knowing the stars will not answer back. And yet, your experience matters to you, and that is enough. Absurdism stands apart from nihilism in this way. Where nihilism sees meaninglessness and gives up, absurdism sees it and stands tall. It does not pretend the world is different than it is, but it chooses to live anyway. For some, this is an act of quiet heroism, a daily choice to get out of bed, to work, to create, to care for others, knowing full well that the universe does not require it of you. And perhaps that is the purest form of freedom. Not the freedom to change the universe, but the freedom to respond to it on your own terms. Absurdism also cautions against easy answers. It warns us not to fall into false comforts, not to believe in meaning simply because it feels better than facing the void. Instead, it asks us to be honest, to accept uncertainty, to walk through life with open eyes. And so the question becomes, if life is absurd, how will you live it? Will you create art that no one may remember? Will you love people who will one day die? Will you pursue dreams that may never come true? Camus would answer yes, because these actions give life its texture, its color, its dignity, even if they fade in the end. Absurdism does not remove suffering. It does not erase tragedy, but it frees you from the exhausting search for ultimate meaning. It invites you to stop waiting for the universe to explain itself and start living. And so, in the quiet spaces of your life, when the world feels distant and cold, absurdism offers no comfort except this. You are here. You are alive. And that is enough. Your laughter echoes, even if no one hears it. Your love matters, even if the stars are silent. Your struggle has meaning because you give it meaning. And maybe that's all life ever was, a fleeting spark of consciousness, pushing its tiny boulder up an endless hill, smiling at the absurdity of it all. Determinism. Determinism begins with a simple, unsettling question. Are you truly free to choose your actions? Or are you simply following a chain of causes stretching back to the dawn of the universe? It suggests that every choice you make, every thought you have, and every step you take was already set in motion long before you were born. Not by fate, not by destiny, but by the cold, mechanical unfolding of cause and effect. From the firing of neurons in your brain to the spin of electrons in distant galaxies, everything that happens because something else made it happen. And if you trace that chain of events far enough back, you reach a chilling conclusion. You could not have done otherwise. At the heart of determinism lies physics. The laws of nature describe a universe where particles move according to precise mathematical rules. Whether it's Newton's clockwork cosmos or the probabilistic strangeness of quantum mechanics, everything that exists follows patterns. Patterns that leave no room for randomness, only complexity. Your brain, your body, your desires, your fears, they too follow these laws. When you reach for a glass of water, it feels like a choice. But beneath that feeling lies a cascade of biological processes. Neurons firing, chemical signals releasing, muscles contracting. And each of these events was triggered by prior events. If someone knew every particle in your brain, every experience you've had, every influence that shaped you, they could, in theory, predict your next move with perfect accuracy. This is the cold heart of determinism. The present is the inevitable consequence of the past. But what about free will? The feeling that you could have chosen differently? That you are the author of your own life? Determinism replies, that feeling is an illusion. A useful one, perhaps, but an illusion nonetheless. You didn't choose your genetics. You didn't choose your childhood. You didn't choose the influences that shaped your mind. And yet, those very things define who you are and how you act. The philosopher Baron D. Holbach, writing in the 18th century, described humans as complex machines. Man's life is a line that nature commands him to describe upon the surface of the earth, without his ever being able to swerve from it, even for an instant. A dark vision, perhaps, but one with profound implications. If determinism is true, what becomes of moral responsibility? How can we blame someone for actions they were always going to commit? How can we punish wrongdoers if they had no real choice? Some argue that justice should not be about blame but about protection. If someone harms others, we must protect society from them, not because they are morally guilty, but because their actions, though determined, are dangerous. This is not mercy. It is pragmatism. Others, like the philosopher Daniel Dennett, suggest a softer view called compatibilism. Compatibilism argues that free will and determinism are not enemies. Even if your actions are determined by prior causes, you can still be considered free if your actions flow from your own desires, values, and reasoning. In this view, free will is not about breaking the chain of cause and effect, but about acting according to who you are. But determinism's shadow remains. If your desires are themselves caused by forces outside your control, are you truly free? Or are you simply a puppet, moved by strings you cannot see? And then there is quantum physics, often invoked as a possible escape from determinism. Quantum events appear random at the smallest scales. But randomness is not freedom either. A random universe does not give you free will, it only replaces certainty with chaos. True freedom, it seems, remains elusive, and yet, despite this, life goes on. You still feel joy, pain, love, regret. You still make plans, set goals, face difficult decisions. Determinism may explain the machinery of your mind, but it does not remove the experience of being alive. Even if your actions were determined, they still matter to you. Your story, written in advance by the universe, is still your story. Perhaps the deeper lesson of determinism is not despair, but humility. To recognize that much of who you are is the product of forces you did not choose. Your upbringing, your environment, your biology, these shaped your strengths and your flaws. And the same is true for others. Maybe this understanding can soften your judgments. When someone wrongs you, remember, they too are shaped by causes beyond their control. When you fail, remember, your failure was not entirely your fault. And when you succeed, remember, your success was built on countless causes you did not create. But this is not an excuse to do nothing. Even in a determined world, your actions ripple outward, becoming part of the chain of cause and effect. You are a link in the great chain of the cosmos. And though you did not forge the chain, you carry it forward. In this view, life becomes a kind of dance. You cannot escape the music, but you can choose how you move to its rhythm, gracefully, joyfully, compassionately. And so, the question of determinism becomes less about whether you are free and more about how you will live, knowing that your freedom may be limited. Will you use this knowledge to give up? Or will you use it to better understand yourself and others? To build a world where we hold compassion for human weakness, knowing that weakness is not chosen. To build systems that nurture goodness, rather than punish flaws? Determinism may strip away the illusion of radical freedom, but in its place it leaves a deep interconnectedness. Every life, every action, every moment linked in an endless chain, stretching backward to the stars and forward to the future. And in that chain, perhaps there is a kind of meaning. You are not separate from the universe. You are the universe experiencing itself in human form, a temporary arrangement of matter and energy, destined to dissolve and reform in countless other ways. Whether you call that freedom or fate is up to you. But in this brief moment of awareness, you can still choose how you respond. And perhaps that response, quiet, thoughtful kind, is enough. The Omnipotence Paradox. Among the oldest and most haunting philosophical puzzles is a simple question about power itself. Can an all-powerful being create a task it cannot accomplish? If it can create such a task, then there is something it cannot do, namely complete that task, meaning it is not truly omnipotent. But if it cannot create such a task, then there is something it cannot create, meaning it is also not omnipotent. Either way, absolute power seems impossible. This is the heart of the Omnipotence Paradox, a question that has challenged theologians, philosophers, and thinkers for centuries. It asks not about the universe, but about the very concept of limitless power. And it reveals something strange. Even perfection may contain contradiction. The paradox is often phrased in a simple riddle. Can God create a stone so heavy that even he cannot lift it? If he cannot create the stone, his power is limited. If he can create it but cannot lift it, his power is also limited. Whichever answer you choose, omnipotence seems to fall apart. But beneath this playful riddle lies a much deeper philosophical concern. Can the idea of infinite power even exist without collapsing into absurdity? Some thinkers have tried to escape the paradox by redefining omnipotence. They argue that true omnipotence means the ability to do all things that are logically possible, but not to do what is logically impossible. For example, even an all-powerful being cannot make a square circle or a married bachelor, because such things are contradictions in terms, not true things at all. By this reasoning, creating a stone too heavy for itself to lift is not a valid task. It's simply a meaningless phrase like drawing a colorless color. So, they argue the paradox does not limit divine power. It merely exposes the limits of human language and logic. But others find this unsatisfying. If you must add qualifications to omnipotence, limiting it only to what is logically possible, is it truly infinite? Isn't logic itself, in this view, a boundary that even divine power cannot cross? And then comes the more unsettling possibility. Perhaps absolute power contains within it the ability to limit itself. Perhaps a truly omnipotent being could choose to give up its own omnipotence, to bind itself by its own will. In this view, the paradox is not a trap, but a demonstration of the ultimate freedom of such a being, not only to act without limits but to choose limits, to create rules, to exist within them. Here, power is not just about force, it is about choice. Religious traditions have wrestled with this puzzle in different ways. In Christianity, some argue that God, though omnipotent, limits his power voluntarily, respecting human free will, allowing suffering, withholding divine intervention. In this light, God's refusal to do everything is not a weakness but a conscious act of restraint. But skeptics see the paradox as evidence that the very concept of omnipotence is incoherent, that it describes a power so great that it becomes meaningless. They argue that infinity, when applied to conscious will, creates contradictions that no being, no matter how powerful, can resolve. Others take the paradox beyond theology and apply it to human ambition. Whenever someone seeks absolute control, over others, over nature, over their own mind, they encounter the same trap. The pursuit of limitless power often leads to self-destruction, because no system, no mind, no ruler can contain infinite control without breaking under its own weight. In this sense, the omnipotence paradox is not just a question about gods. It is a mirror held up to human desires, a warning against the hunger for total control, a reminder that limits, far from being flaws, may be essential to the structure of reality. Philosophers like Ludwig Wittgenstein might suggest that the paradox arises not from reality, but from the way we use language. We create the illusion of contradiction by combining words, stone, cannot lift, all-powerful, into a scenario that cannot exist. In this view, the paradox dissolves not through explanation, but through clarity. And yet, the question persists, lingering in human thought, refusing to disappear. Because beneath it lies a deeper mystery. If power is without limits, does it lose its meaning? Is power defined not by what it can do, but by what it chooses to do? Perhaps omnipotence is not a blank check to do everything, but the wisdom to know what not to do. Perhaps the highest form of power is restraint, the ability to hold back, to allow freedom, to create a world where not everything is controlled. And so, the omnipotence paradox does not offer answers, but reflections. It asks us to think not just about gods and stones, but about the limits of logic, the nature of power, and the meaning of freedom. Whether you believe in a divine being or not, the paradox forces you to confront the boundaries of thought itself, to ask whether some questions have no answers, or whether the very act of questioning is what gives them their power. In the end, the omnipotence paradox remains unsolved. It is a circle with no center, a stone that no one can lift, not because of weakness, but because the question itself defies resolution. But perhaps, like many paradoxes, its purpose is not to be solved, but to be pondered, to remind us that even in our search for the infinite, we carry the limits of human reason with us. And in those limits, perhaps we find something even greater than power, the quiet acceptance of mystery, moral anti-realism, Most of us grow up believing that some things are truly right and others are truly wrong. That kindness is good, cruelty is evil, and justice has a reality beyond personal opinion. We speak of morality as if it were written into the very fabric of the universe, like the laws of physics or the structure of mathematics. But what if this is an illusion? What if good and evil are not universal truths, but human creations, shaped by biology, culture, and circumstance? This is the unsettling claim of moral anti-realism, a philosophical position that denies the existence of objective moral facts. According to anti-realists, there is no cosmic law that says murder is wrong, no eternal truth declaring honesty as good. Right and wrong are ideas we invent, useful, meaningful, but ultimately subjective. Moral anti-realism is not the same as saying that morality doesn't matter. Rather, it challenges where morality comes from. It asks whether morality exists independently of human minds or whether it is entirely a product of them. Consider a simple question. If no conscious beings had ever existed, would it still be wrong to cause harm? A moral realist would say yes. They believe that moral facts are woven into the structure of reality, waiting to be discovered. Even if no one were around to recognize them, cruelty would still be wrong. But the moral anti-realist disagrees. They argue that without minds to feel pain or joy, without beings to create values and desires, concepts like wrong and right have no meaning. Morality, in this view, is not an external truth but a human invention, as real as our languages and governments, but no more absolute. There are several forms of moral anti-realism. Moral subjectivists believe that moral claims are simply expressions of personal feelings or cultural norms. When we say kindness is good, we're not stating a fact about the universe. We're expressing approval. Much like saying, I like chocolate or sunsets are beautiful. Error theorists like the philosopher J.L. Mackie take this further. They argue that when people make moral claims, they speak as if those claims are objectively true. But according to Mackie, all such claims are false, because objective moral facts don't exist at all. In this view, morality is built on a fundamental error, the mistaken belief that our values reflect the universe, rather than ourselves. Then there are non-cognitivists, who argue that moral statements don't even aim to describe reality. When you say stealing is wrong, you're not stating a fact. You're expressing a command, an emotion, or a social attitude. Morality, in this view, is closer to cheering for your favorite team than to describing a scientific fact. For moral anti-realists, the diversity of moral systems throughout human history is evidence of their claim. Different cultures have embraced wildly different moral codes. Practices considered virtuous in one society, like vengeance, sacrifice, or arranged marriage, are condemned in another. If morality were truly objective, wouldn't we expect greater agreement across time and culture? But for many, moral anti-realism feels unsettling. If right and wrong are inventions, what stops someone from creating a morality that justifies cruelty, oppression, or genocide? If morality is subjective, does that mean anything goes? Moral anti-realists reply that even invented systems can have real consequences. We create moral frameworks not because they are objectively true, but because they help us live together, reduce suffering, and build flourishing communities. Compassion is still better than cruelty, not because the universe demands it, but because life is better with it. In this view, morality is a human project. It evolves, improves, and adapts as we learn more about human nature and the world we inhabit. It is not timeless, but it can still be wise. It is not perfect, but it can still guide us toward a better life. Some anti-realists take comfort in this flexibility. If morality is invented, then we are not trapped by ancient codes or dogmas. We can question our values, change our minds, and build more inclusive systems of ethics. But others feel the loss of certainty. Without objective morality, what do we appeal to when confronting injustice? If someone says cruelty is good, can we truly say they are wrong, or only that we disagree? Moral anti-realism leaves us with these uncomfortable questions. It removes the safety net of cosmic justice. But in doing so, it hands responsibility back to us. If morality is a human invention, then it is up to us to shape it wisely. And perhaps in this responsibility, there is a strange kind of hope. We cannot rely on the universe to save us from ourselves, but we can listen to each other, reason together, and build systems of ethics grounded not in eternal truths, but in empathy and shared experience. Moral anti-realism does not diminish the importance of kindness, honesty, or justice. It simply asks us to recognize them as fragile human creations, beautiful because they are chosen, not because they are imposed. And perhaps that makes them even more precious. Because in a world without objective meaning, the values we create together shine all the brighter against the darkness of indifference. Last Thursdayism. Among the strangest and most playful of philosophical theories is last Thursdayism, a thought experiment that challenges the very foundation of what we call the past. It asks a seemingly absurd question. What if the entire universe, with all its history, memories, and evidence, was created just last Thursday? Not just the earth and the sky, but your body, your mind, and every thought you've ever had, all brought into existence in one instant. Your memories of childhood, your old photographs, ancient fossils buried deep in the earth, all fabricated as part of the moment of creation. And yet, from your point of view, everything would feel completely normal. You would remember growing up, falling in love, making mistakes, and learning lessons. The world would be filled with historical records, scientific data, and evidence of billions of years of history. But all of it would be an illusion created only days ago. This idea is not meant to be taken literally. It is a modern, tongue-in-cheek version of an ancient philosophical challenge known as the problem of induction or the epistemological challenge of the past. It asks, how do we know the past really happened instead of being something we were simply made to believe happened? From a logical standpoint, there is no absolute proof that the universe wasn't created last Thursday, complete with all the signs pointing to a much older history. Any evidence you could offer, historical texts, fossils, your own memories, could have been fabricated at the moment of creation. No observation can conclusively rule out this possibility, because all observations come from within the system that might itself have been created last week. This idea is closely related to an older concept known as the omphalos hypothesis, proposed in the 19th century. The term omphalos refers to the navel. According to this hypothesis, when God created Adam, he might have created him with a navel, a sign of a birth that never happened, to make him appear naturally developed. By extension, God could have created the earth complete with fossils, erosion, and distant starlight already in motion, making it look old even though it was freshly formed. Last Thursdayism strips away the religious context and turns the question into a broader philosophical puzzle. If it is logically possible for a universe to be created complete with false memories and fabricated evidence, how can we ever claim to truly know the past? But what makes last Thursdayism particularly fascinating and unsettling is that it exposes the limits of empirical knowledge. Science relies on observations of the present to make inferences about the past. But if the entire past was fabricated as part of the present, those inferences, though consistent and rational, could be completely wrong. In this view, science can explain how things work, but it cannot ultimately prove when they began. So, does this mean we should take last Thursdayism seriously? Most philosophers would say no. While it's logically possible, it's not a useful hypothesis. It makes no predictions, solves no problems, and cannot be tested. It's an example of an unfalsifiable theory, a claim that, by its nature, cannot be proven wrong, and therefore sits outside the bounds of scientific inquiry. But even if we don't take it literally, last Thursdayism serves as a philosophical reminder. Our knowledge of the world rests on assumptions. We trust our memories. We trust the evidence we observe. And we trust that the universe operates consistently over time. Without this trust, the entire project of understanding reality collapses. But there's another way to view last Thursdayism. Not as a threat to knowledge, but as an invitation to humility. It reminds us that some questions may have no answer, or that the very act of questioning is limited by the tools of our minds. We may never be able to prove that the past exists independently of our memories of it, but we can still live meaningfully in the present, guided by the knowledge we have. For some, last Thursdayism is a playful game, a philosophical joke reminding us of the absurdity of radical skepticism. For others, it's a serious warning about the limits of human reason. And for a few, it's a metaphor for faith, a recognition that at some level all our knowledge rests on belief. Whether or not the universe began last Thursday, your experiences feel real. Your relationships, your joys, your sorrows, all of them carry meaning, even if they were created just days ago. And perhaps that is what truly matters. Not how long the universe has existed, but how you live within it now. Last Thursdayism may not change the way you pay your bills, care for your loved ones, or find beauty in a sunset, but it leaves behind a quiet echo in your mind. A reminder that reality, as solid and certain as it seems, may always contain mysteries we cannot solve. And so, you carry on, living each day as if it were part of a much longer story. Whether that story began billions of years ago or just last Thursday, you will never truly know. But maybe you don't need to. The problem of evil. Few philosophical questions have troubled human thought as deeply as the problem of evil. It is not merely an abstract puzzle. It is a confrontation with some of the darkest realities of human life. Suffering, injustice, and cruelty. At its heart lies a painful contradiction. If God is all-powerful, he could prevent evil. If God is all-knowing, he would know how to prevent evil. If God is all-good, he would want to prevent evil. And yet, evil exists. This is the classic form of the problem of evil, famously articulated by the ancient philosopher Epicurus and later developed by countless thinkers. It asks, how can we reconcile the existence of an all-powerful, all-knowing, and all-good God with the reality of suffering in the world? Natural disasters kill the innocent. Disease and famine strike without warning. Cruelty, hatred, and war leave countless victims. The world is filled not just with pain, but with what seems to be pointless, senseless pain. If God exists, why allow this? Throughout history, theologians and philosophers have offered many answers, known as theodicies, attempts to justify God's goodness despite the presence of evil. One of the most common is the free will defense. It argues that true freedom requires the possibility of evil. If humans were mere puppets, incapable of wrongdoing, they would not be truly free. In this view, God values human freedom so highly that he allows us to make terrible choices, choices that result in suffering. Evil, then, is the cost of free will. But this defense only explains moral evil, the evil caused by human actions. What about natural evil, earthquakes, hurricanes, deadly viruses? These are not the result of human choices, yet they cause immense suffering. Some argue that suffering, even when painful, plays a role in spiritual growth. That hardships build character, compassion, and resilience. Without struggle, there would be no courage. Without loss, no empathy. In this view, suffering is not meaningless. It is the soil in which virtue grows. Others propose that human minds are simply too limited to grasp the full picture. What we perceive as meaningless suffering may serve a greater good beyond our understanding. Just as a child cannot understand the painful but necessary treatments of a doctor, perhaps we cannot comprehend God's reasons for allowing pain. But critics find these answers unsatisfying. Why must children die from disease? Why must innocent lives be destroyed by disaster? Couldn't an all-powerful God create a world where people grow through joy instead of pain? The problem of evil becomes even more troubling when we consider gratuitous evil, suffering that seems to have no purpose at all. If some evil contributes to growth, what about suffering that ends in death, with no lesson, no redemption, no clear benefit to anyone? Philosopher William Rowe described the case of a fawn trapped in a forest fire, suffering a slow, painful death without any human ever knowing it happened. What possible greater good could justify such agony? In the face of such questions, some thinkers embrace skeptical theism. They argue that just because we cannot see a purpose does not mean none exists. The limits of human knowledge prevent us from making final judgments about the presence of evil in the world. But others find these defenses weak. If God's goodness and power are beyond human comprehension, then how can we trust anything about him? If suffering might serve an unknown purpose, why do we believe that God is good, rather than indifferent or cruel? Some philosophers, unable to resolve the tension, reject the idea of a perfect God altogether. They argue that the existence of evil is strong evidence against an all-powerful, all-good deity. If God exists, they suggest, he must be either unable or unwilling to prevent suffering, or perhaps such a being does not exist at all. But for many religious believers, the presence of evil deepens rather than destroys faith. They see in suffering not a contradiction of God's goodness, but a mystery of divine purpose. Some point to the life of Jesus, whose suffering on the cross is viewed as a redemptive act, proof that God himself has entered into human pain. In this view, God does not remain distant from suffering but shares in it. Beyond theology, the problem of evil raises broader questions about the nature of reality. Is suffering an inevitable part of existence? Is the universe indifferent to human happiness? Or is there some deeper meaning hidden within the chaos? For some, the answer is resignation. The universe is cold and impersonal, and suffering is simply part of life. For others, the answer is hope. That even in suffering, there is the possibility of compassion, connection, and meaning. Perhaps, in the end, the problem of evil is not a puzzle to be solved, but a wound to be faced. It reminds us of our vulnerability, our limits, and our longing for a world without pain. And whether or not that world exists, the question of evil forces us to confront our own response to suffering. Will we turn away in despair, or will we meet pain with empathy? Will we use our freedom to harm or to heal? The problem of evil may never be resolved, but in the shadow of its unanswered question, we find a call to kindness, compassion, and understanding, fragile lights in a world that often seems dark. And perhaps for now that is enough. Zeno's paradoxes. Zeno of Elea, a philosopher from ancient Greece, left behind some of the most puzzling and enduring questions in human thought. His paradoxes ask us to look more closely at what seems obvious, the simple act of movement, and to realize that, under the surface, it may not be so simple at all. Imagine crossing a room. Before you reach the other side, you first travel halfway. Before that, halfway to halfway. And before that, halfway to that point. On and on it goes, each distance cut in half without ever truly reaching the destination. If space can be divided endlessly, how do you ever complete the journey? It feels as though you are trapped in an infinite process, unable to begin, let alone finish. Now picture a swift runner, chasing a slow-moving tortoise who had a small head start. Every time the runner reaches the spot where the tortoise once stood, the tortoise has moved a little farther ahead. Although the runner moves faster, the logic suggests he is always closing the gap but never overtaking his rival. Of course, in the real world, we know the runner would win easily. But the paradox asks us to pause and consider, what does it really mean to catch up when each moment of progress seems infinitely divisible? Or think of an arrow in flight. At every single instant, the arrow occupies a fixed point in space. It is motionless in that moment. But if every instant is a still frame, where is the motion? How does something frozen at each point of time combine to create movement? These paradoxes seem absurd on the surface. After all, we see motion all around us. We walk across rooms, we run races, we watch arrows fly. But Zeno's arguments reveal a deeper puzzle about how space and time are structured. If they can be divided infinitely, how can anything move? If every action involves completing an infinite number of steps, how is motion possible at all? For centuries, these questions remained unanswered. It was only with the development of calculus that thinkers began to explain how an infinite series of ever smaller steps could add up to a finite whole. Mathematics showed that the sum of an infinite sequence could converge to a single value, solving the technical part of the puzzle. But for some, the deeper question remains unresolved. What is motion? Is it a smooth, continuous flow through space? Or is it a series of discrete jumps that only seem smooth because our perception cannot detect the gaps? Modern physics adds new layers to the mystery. Quantum mechanics suggests that, at the smallest scales, space and time may be made up of tiny, indivisible units. If true, reality might not be continuous after all, but a patchwork of minuscule fragments stitched together by unseen laws. Yet other theories, like relativity, describe the universe as a seamless fabric of spacetime. These two views coexist uneasily, reflecting the same tension Zeno raised so long ago. Beyond science, Zeno's paradoxes challenge the very way we reason. They show how human logic, when applied too rigidly, can lead us into conclusions that contradict our everyday experience. You can reason that motion is impossible, even as you take a step forward. You can argue that a runner will never catch a tortoise, even though the race has been won countless times. Perhaps this is the paradox's true lesson: the difference between how we explain the world and how we live in it. Logic may falter where experience is clear, but experience, too, is filtered through the limits of our senses and minds. In the end, Zeno leaves us with a quiet question lingering beneath our footsteps. When we move from one place to another, what are we truly doing? Are we crossing an infinite series of distances, or simply existing in a world where movement happens despite what reason says? Maybe the answer is hidden in the structure of reality itself. Or maybe it is hidden in the gaps between our thoughts, the places where language and logic fall silent, and life simply goes on. Whatever the truth, Zeno reminds us not to take the obvious for granted. The next time you walk across a room, consider the strange, infinite spaces that might lie beneath each step, and marvel that you crossed them without ever noticing. Ending. And now I wonder, which of these strange philosophical ideas resonated with you the most? Which one felt like a glimpse of some deeper truth, and which simply felt strange or perhaps even absurd? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear what theories you believe and which ones you still question. If this video made you think, or helped you drift off into thoughtful sleep, leave a like to let me know. And if you haven't yet, feel free to subscribe for more journeys like this one. Maybe share this video with a friend, someone who loves a good mystery before bed. Thank you for spending this time with me. Sleep well, and may your dreams be filled with questions, not answers. Good night.